Hello, and welcome to Sunshine for Your Life. As usual, I like to do stories when I first start out one of these shows because I like to bring the scriptures into modern life and apply it to modern life. So I'm going to start out with a little story today about something that happened when I was watching television. I was watching a television show. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it was one of those house renovation shows where you go in and you reconstruct the house, you pull everything apart, you get new appliances, you rebuild the house. So it was like a house makeover. And what the people who were doing it wanted was an art piece in the living room. They wanted to get a very, very large art piece, and I saw what they were working with, and I'm going to judge what the size of it was. I actually measured one of my own paintings because it looked to me to be about the same size. It would have been like 5 feet long and 2.5 or 3 feet down. And it was a nice landscape. Now, they either bought it or they got it at a yard sale, but they had a landscape painting, which I thought was very nice. Water, trees, the whole nature thing, which I like. And it was a beautiful painting. But they wanted something original for the household. They didn't want to use that one. I think they may have just got it at a yard sale or something. So what they did horrified me. They covered that whole painting with black paint. They painted over the painting that was already there that was very nice. And what you had was a canvas that was framed. It was all totally black. They covered that landscape with black paint. So it's a big, big painting with nothing but black on it. And then the person who was doing it put their hand in a bucket of red paint, bright red paint. They showed him doing it. He stuck his hand in. It's all covered with red paint. And then he puts an imprint of his hand on the black painting. So what you had when you were finished was a whole huge art piece that was totally black with one red handprint on it in the lower corner of the painting. And I thought to myself, is this really art? A 10-year-old could have done it. And I just didn't think it was art. And the thing that bothered me the most, I think, was the fact that they destroyed something that somebody else had done. And it must have been important to the person who painted it, because otherwise why would they have spent the time? So you have this huge blackness, and you have a red handprint on it, and they thought of that as being a modern art piece. Well, maybe it is a modern art piece, but as I said, I was disturbed by the fact that they already took somebody's work that they had worked hard on and destroyed it by an act of their own hand. I mean, if I went to an art store and I bought a piece of art or looked at a piece of art and I said, gee, it would look better if I did this to it. I think I'll add some black over here. We'll add a few extra flowers. Do I have the right to do it? It's really destroying a work of art. Now, I can't get into the morals of it. I'm not saying it's immoral or moral. That's not my purpose. But I don't like to have something destroyed that somebody has worked hard to create. And if you think about God and what he does for us, isn't it true that Satan has destroyed or tried to destroy what God has created? Isn't it true that all of the problems of the earth has stopped some people from creating what they would like to create? It is too bad. Now, the Bible has something to say about light and the fact that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. And so I'm going to read a couple of scriptures here. When God created the earth, he created it in light, because the Bible says there is no darkness at all with God. So Genesis 1:3 says, let there be light, and there was light. And Matthew 5:14 says, you are the light of the world. Now, Jesus is considered to be the light of the world. He calls himself the light of the world, like he calls himself the good shepherd. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. It's written that way in the scriptures. And in 1 John 1:5, and I'm reading all of these, by the way, from the New International Version, God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. To take something and destroy it, something that somebody else has done, I think is a really sad thing. And I'm not saying that it's a horrible, immoral thing. I just think it's just something that shouldn't be done. God helps us to understand ourselves, and God creates us. Let us be happy in the fact that He's created us. Let us do what He wants us to do. Let us produce and be creative for Him, and not destroy somebody else's work. God helps us with our confusion. He helps us with the problems that we have. Now, I have a saying on my apartment door. I took it off eventually, but it was a saying I put on my apartment door. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who wrote it, so I don't know who to give credit to. But a lot of people liked it. They laughed about it. They thought it was funny, and they started posting it on their own doors. And this is what it says. I am lost. I have gone to look for myself. If I should return before I get back, please ask me to wait. Well, when people read that, they laugh. I think it's because it hits a chord in us in terms of when we feel confused. I'm looking for myself. I'm lost. Who knows? Maybe I'm not lost. If I come back and I'm already here, ask me to wait. So I think it just talks about the confusion and describes how we feel. It certainly probably described how the Samaritan woman felt, because the Samaritan woman had all kinds of problems, and Jesus ministered to her, and Jesus basically healed her, and He called Himself the living water. So the Samaritan woman, if you remember the story in the New Testament, she was a person who was not living a godly life. She was living with a man. She had lived with several men before that, and Jesus just came to talk to her about her life and see what happened to her. She was healed of what she had done. The Samaritan woman drew water during the heat of the day. Now you have to remember, no plumbing, no pipes, no faucets. In the biblical times, you had to go out and get water, and you would get it from like a community well. And most women would draw water. They had these huge, huge cisterns that they put it in, that they carried on their shoulders. And they would do it, most women, in the beginning of the day before it got terribly hot, or at the end of the day when it started to cool off. But the Samaritan woman, because of her living circumstances and the lifestyle that she had, always drew water in the heat of the day. That's when most women would not be there. And that's the reason she did it. She did not want to look at the comments, hear the comments, the sneers of the women who were living a lifestyle that was appropriate, directed to her. Oh, look at her. See what she's done. See what she's doing. And she did not want to be pointed out. So she just went ahead and drew her water when it was the hottest. And John 4, verse 7 through 10 says, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Now here he makes the reference to the fact that he is living water. He satisfies our soul with good things. And he says, if you are a Christian, if you know him, you will never thirst and you will never be hungry again. But he's talking, of course, in a spiritual sense. You know, I've worked with a lot of people. I've counseled a lot of people. For years, I was a board-certified counselor, and I had my own counseling center for over 20 years. Plus, I was on staff with 2 other counseling centers. And it always amazed me, especially working with teenagers, how they struggle to find out how they fit. How do they fit in this world? What do they want to do? What do they want to grow up to be? And it's hard for them. They want to live a lifestyle that fits them, that they feel is right for them. They don't know what that is. And so it just is something to work with these kids. And then if they have a Christian faith-based life, then they may not know exactly what they're going to do when they grow up, when they get through college, but they know they're on the right track. Because one, they know that they believe in God, and God's going to lead them into just what's right for them. You know, we ask kids the wrong questions sometimes when they're growing up. Teachers will say, okay, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, to begin with, no child knows. They could be interested in tons of things. They could be a very smart child and have several things they want to do. To ask them to pick one just really isn't fair. It isn't fair because what they're going to do as they grow up, they're going to hone it down. I love this, I love that. I could do either one. Which one should I do? It shouldn't be a decision that's so traumatic to them. They should just allow God to lead them where He wants to lead them, and He will lead them in the right way. I remember when I was growing up, and I was a teenager, and I was studying music at a university. They allowed me in as a special student of music. I was much too young to be a college student, so I couldn't be admitted as a college student. I wasn't a genius in everything. But the thing is, I needed to have music lessons on a much more advanced level than I could get them in other places. So the university made special forms for me and had a special admission procedure for me so I could be admitted as a college student. I was too young to drive. People had to take me to my lessons, but I studied with college professors because I was on that level. And it was a wonderful thing, but my problem was I was trying also to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to go into music, but I also wanted to go into psychology. I had a real interest in psychology, and I did get 3 degrees in counseling and psychology when I went to college. So for me, I used to argue with myself, what am I going to do? Is it music or is it psychology? Then I decided, why not combine the two and do music therapy? I would really have the best of both worlds. But the university that I went to didn't have any kind of curriculum in music therapy. You can go to college and get degrees in it now. But when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. So I decided to study music separately and pursue psychology. And then I would add music to what I was doing in psychology, and I did that. And for a while, I went to a school to teach. And the school had people in it that were intellectually deficient. They had problems. We used to call it retardation, and maybe we don't do that anymore. Maybe it's not politically correct. But these kids didn't have the intellectual ability to take care of themselves or go to school. But I, as a psychology major, would be able to work with them and counsel them and work with them and help them out. And I added music to that beautifully. I would bring in all kinds of instruments, usually rhythm instruments, the little castanets, the little drums, and they would just hang on to that and they would play those, and I would play background music. They would not be able to understand the mechanics of music, scale work, keys, harmonies, how you get all of that. They wouldn't be able to understand that, but they could experience it. They could experience the joy of making sounds, listening to the sounds that they created, seeing how the sounds fit in with background music that I was playing for them, usually on a record player, because way back then, we didn't use tape recorders. We had these vinyl records and we would play them. And they would sit there and they would listen to the music and they would make sounds and they would make noises and they'd shake the castanets and so forth. And it was very good. There was one little boy who hadn't spoken in 3 weeks. He just could not speak. He would not speak. For some reason, he was really depressed. And the first week, I put a little instrument on his desk and he wouldn't have anything to do with it. He put his head down on his desk and he wouldn't pay any attention. I just left him alone. The second week, he sat up and he paid attention, but he wouldn't touch an instrument. And then the third week, he started playing the instrument, he started talking, he started being himself, he started enjoying himself. And I credit the music, and also to a certain degree in my patience, because I never forced him into anything. That wasn't the purpose. I wanted him to feel good enough about himself to be able to try something. Not that he was forced, but that it would be his decision. And so he's playing away and he's just having a great time. And he just went right out of his depression, started talking, and became as normal as he could be, and it was a wonderful thing. But you see, students growing up, they don't know what they want to do, and I don't think it's wise for them to try to make a decision too early, because when you make a decision too early, later on you're changing your major, you're trying to do something else. So to get back to what I was talking about, the woman talked to Jesus about her salvation. He talked to her. She kept resisting him. She kept saying things, well, how do we know where to worship? Is it on this mountain? Is it on this mountain? And basically she was resisting him. But what he did, he knew what she had done. He knew her lifestyle. And then he just talked to her about that and forgave her for everything. And she suddenly realized that she was talking to the Messiah, that he really was who he claimed to be. Let me read a couple of other verses here. In John 4, verse 25 and 26, the woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I who speak to you am he. He identified himself. He is the Messiah. He is perfect. And as a perfect individual, being both God and man, he has that right to be forgiving. He can forgive. We can forgive too, but his forgiveness is eternal. Once you're forgiven of something, it's done, it's over with. And she was totally forgiven. And at that point, she left her water pots that she had come to draw water with behind, and she ran into the local city and she started telling people about the Lord. And she said, this is a man who knows everything I've ever done. He must be the Messiah. Then they all start coming out to see him, and he teaches them also. And what happened basically is that she became the first missionary. And because she was telling, what does a missionary do? They talk about the Lord, they teach about the Lord, they preach about Jesus, and they do it in other places, but they can also do it in their hometowns. And this is what she did. In verse 34 and 35 of that same chapter, John 4, he said, Jesus says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say 4 months more and then the harvest? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. What he means by that is they are ripe for people to get to know him. If you're going to help somebody, help them. Don't wait for a certain time. The time is now. The time is now to help somebody out. People have a great desire to be connected to something that's bigger to themselves. They are attaching themselves to something. You will feel a lot better if you attach yourself to something that's bigger than you are. It could be an organization. It could be an idea. It could be a certain group of people. It could be your family. But people have to attach themselves. One of the things that happens in child development in babies is as they grow, they learn to attach themselves to the people who take care of them. They attach themselves to their moms and dads. Now, unfortunately, in a condition like autism, the attachment isn't there. Or in some children who become mentally ill, the attachment is not there. They can't seem to make an attachment. If you hold them, they don't want to be held. It's very unusual for a baby not to want to be held. They find comfort in that. But some babies don't want to be held. They don't want to be talked to. They're kind of in their own little world. And when that happens, you expect either some kind of a mental illness or you expect autism, because that's one of the characteristics of it. And I know a lot of people, a lot of babies, they are normal when they are born and they become autistic or show signs of it when they're toddlers, when they're about 2 years old, or thereabouts, 2 to 4, when they're still really young. But they started off being all right as normal babies. So what happened? Well, what happened is what they believe has happened is that the brain development, in the brain development, which is very intense at age 2, for some reason they grow a lot of extra nerve cells that aren't supposed to be there. A normal baby has so many nerve cells and they develop over time, so the baby can do more and more physical activities over time as they're growing up. But in some ways, with the autism, they get to be about age 2, and suddenly their brain is growing tons of nerve cells that shouldn't be there. Nerve cells in the brain are called neurons. and there are too many of them. So actually to the point where the brain is heavier than it should be, and it's by several ounces sometimes. And you can't make, the baby cannot, or the brain cannot make the right connections, the great nerve connections as they're supposed to be, because there are just too many nerves to do it with. And then when that happens, they start developing the symptoms of autism. Well, back to this again. We don't have much time left. People try to fill what they want to do in life with the wrong things sometimes. Alcoholism, drug addiction, things like that. But what you need to do is realize that there is a God in heaven that loves you enough to come down and to deal with you and work with you and get you to the place where you should be, forgive your sins, lead you in the direction that you should be led in, and you can be forgiven and helped and have freedom. You don't have to have your life covered with blackness. You don't have to do that. You would need to allow the Lord to enter into your life and do with you as he wants to do with you, because it's always going to be good. He never makes a mistake. And then you'll be comfortable. You'll know where you should be. You'll know what's right for you, because he will show you. And you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer from shame because you've done something wrong, because you're forgiven. You don't have to suffer because something is destroying you, just like that painting was destroyed by the black paint, because he will restore you once again. So I'm going to close it here because we really don't have much time left. And if you have any questions or comments, whatever, email me here at the station and I will answer you on the air. So we'll close for now, and please join me next time.